Jared was used to working long hours as a mechanic. He spent most of his time fixing broken-down ships and machines. He didn't mind the hard work. It was a job that paid the bills, even though it wasn't glamorous. The sun had already set, but he was still in his small, crowded workshop. His hands were covered in grease, and his eyes felt heavy. The ship in front of him had been stubborn all night. It was an old freighter, and it seemed to take forever to fix. He rubbed his tired eyes and checked the time. It was well past midnight. Jared had hoped to finish the job hours ago, but something always seemed to go wrong. He glanced at the clock again. The minutes dragged on, and the silence in the workshop was only broken by the sound of the tools clicking and clanging. Jared leaned against the workbench, trying to stay awake. He had barely slept the past few nights, but there was always work to do. The life of a mechanic wasn't easy, but it was all he knew. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to keep him going. His small workshop in the outer parts of the galaxy was the only home he had. He didn't mind being alone. It was easier that way. No distractions, just him and the machines. But tonight, something felt different. He could feel his exhaustion pulling at him, his body begging him to stop. He needed rest. But he couldn't afford to quit. There was still so much work to do, and the ship had to be finished by morning dot as Jared bent down to adjust a loose bolt. He heard the door open behind him. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but when the sound came again, he turned around. Standing in the doorway was a woman he didn't recognize. She was tall, with long, dark hair and a confident posture. She was wearing a formal outfit, one that didn't seem to fit in with the dusty, industrial surroundings of his workshop. "Can I help you?" Jared asked, wiping his hands on a rag. The woman stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room as if she were used to finer surroundings. "Are you Jared, the mechanic?" Jared raised an eyebrow. "That's me. What can I do for you?" The woman hesitated for a moment, looking at him closely. There was something about her that seemed familiar, though he couldn't place it. "I'm Alara," she said. "I've heard about your work." Jared wasn't sure if he should be impressed or suspicious. Alara. That name sounded important, but he had no idea why. "I'm sorry, but I don't usually take clients at this hour," Jared said, turning back to the ship he was working on. "If you need something fixed, I can help during business hours." Alara shook her head. "I'm not here for a simple repair. I need your help, and I need it now." Jared stopped what he was doing. The urgency in her voice caught his attention. "What do you mean?" he asked, standing up straight. "I'm afraid I can't do anything tonight. You'll have to wait until morning." "I don't have time to wait," she said, stepping closer. "My family's fleet is under attack. I need you to repair the ships." Jared stared at her, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "Your family's fleet?" he asked, confused. "What does that have to do with me?" "I'm the heiress to one of the largest families in the galaxy," Alara explained. "But right now, my family is at risk. I've been told that only you can fix our ships. They're in critical condition, and we can't afford to wait." Jared couldn't believe what he was hearing. He wasn't used to dealing with people like her. His clients were usually traders, travelers, or the occasional pirate. But the heiress of a powerful family? That was something else entirely. "You're asking me to fix your family's fleet?" Jared asked, still trying to make sense of the situation. "Why me? There are hundreds of mechanics more qualified than I am." Alara's expression softened. "Because you're the best," she said. "I've heard of your skills. Jared, you fixed ships that no one else could. I don't have a choice. Please, I need your help." Jared could see the sincerity in her eyes, but he was still hesitant. He had never been involved in something so big, and he didn't want to get caught up in a dangerous situation. The last thing he wanted was to be dragged into the politics of powerful families. "I don't know if I can help you," he said, rubbing his forehead. "I'm just one guy, and I'm tired. I've been working all night." Alara took a step closer, her voice softening. "I understand," she said. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't need you. But if you don't help, my family could lose everything. People will die." Jared looked at her, his mind racing. He had never faced a decision like this before. He had always kept his life simple, but now this stranger was asking him to risk everything to save her family. He sighed. All right, I'll help you, but I need some rest first. Alara nodded. Thank you, she said, her voice filled with relief. You won't regret it. Jared wasn't sure if that was true, but he knew he couldn't turn his back on someone in need. He would fix the ships. He didn't have much of a choice, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was the start of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. Jared woke up with a start, his eyes blinking as he tried to adjust to the new surroundings. The last thing he remembered was working in his workshop, then hearing Alara's desperate plea. He had collapsed from exhaustion, and now he found himself lying on a soft, comfortable bed. The room was much cleaner and fancier than anything he was used to. The walls were made of smooth, polished stone, and the furniture was sleek, with sharp edges that looked like they belonged in a palace. He sat up slowly, feeling the weight of his tired muscles, and saw Alara sitting nearby. She was watching him, her expression serious but kind. Where am I? Jared asked, rubbing his eyes. You're in my family's estate, Alara replied. I brought you here to rest. You collapsed before you could say yes, and I didn't want you to make any decisions when you were exhausted. Jared nodded, still trying to make sense of everything. How long have I been here? About 4 hours. Alara answered. You've been asleep for most of it. I didn't want to wake you, but I had to talk to you when you were better rested. Jared looked at her, noticing the serious tone in her voice. He had thought she was just another rich woman who needed help, but now he could see something deeper. In her eyes, she was more than just an heiress. She was someone who had been through a lot, and she had come to him for help. What's going on, Alara? Jared asked, his voice quiet. You said your family was under attack. What does that mean? Alara stood up and walked over to a table in the corner of the room. She picked up a small, portable screen and turned it on. It flickered to life, showing a map of the galaxy. A large area near the center was marked in red. My family's fleet has been targeted by a rival group. They want to take control of our territory and resources. Our ships are old and outdated. They're struggling to keep up with the newer, more advanced technology that the enemy has. But there's one thing they don't know, Alara said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They don't know about you. Jared frowned, confused. What do you mean? How can I help you? Alara's face softened, and she looked at him with an intensity that made his heart race. You're the only one who can repair our ships. I've seen the work you've done. You fixed things no one else could. My family needs you, Jared. Without your help, we'll lose everything. Jared sat back on the bed, his mind spinning. The words family, rival group, and lose everything were hard to process. He had never been a part of something so big, and it was difficult to imagine that his skills as a mechanic could make such a difference in the fate of an entire fleet. You don't even know me, Jared said. Why trust me with something so important? I'm just a mechanic. Alara smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. I've heard the stories, she said. You fixed ships that no one else could even touch, and you did it on your own. I don't have anyone else I can trust. My family's advisors don't understand the mechanics of the ships. They just know how to command them. But you, Jared, you're different. You're the kind of person who can turn a broken-down ship into something that flies like it's new. Jared felt a weight settle in his chest. He had spent so many years fixing old ships that he had forgotten what it was like to be recognized for his skill. But Alara's words felt different, more serious. She wasn't just praising him for his work. She was counting on him to save everything she had worked for. I don't know what to say, Jared replied, running a hand through his hair. This is all too much for me. I've never been involved in anything like this. I've always kept to myself, fixing ships when they break down and moving on. Alara walked over to him, kneeling down so that she was eye level with him. I understand this is overwhelming, but I need you, Jared. If we don't fix the fleet, we won't be able to defend ourselves. And if we don't defend ourselves, we'll lose everything. Jared met her gaze, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. There was no doubt in her voice. She was asking him for help because she believed in him. That was something Jared had never experienced before. In the quiet of his workshop, he had always been just another mechanic, another worker. But now, for the first time in his life, he realized that his skills mattered, that they could make a real difference. He took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "All right, I'll help you." Alara's face brightened, and she stood up. "Thank you. You don't know how much this means to me." Jared stood as well, still feeling unsure, but knowing that there was no turning back. This wasn't just about fixing a few ships, it was about saving a family, a legacy, and maybe Eve, and his own future. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "Where do we start?" Alara walked over to the screen and zoomed in on a part of the map. "We need to get to the shipyard. That's where the fleet is being repaired. But we'll need to move quickly. The enemy is getting closer." Jared nodded again, his mind now focused. He had a job to do, and he would do it. Whatever happened next, he was ready. Jared stood in front of the large transport ship, his tools in hand. The ship's hull was dented, its engines damaged, and the systems were far from functioning properly. It was clear that this wasn't going to be an easy repair. Jared had worked on many ships in his life, but nothing like this. The stakes were much higher now. Alara stood beside him, watching him closely. She had stayed quiet most of the time, giving him space to work, but Jared could sense the weight of the situation on her. She was depending on him, and that felt heavier than anything he had ever done before. "You're sure you can fix this?" Alara asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of worry in her eyes. Jared glanced up from the ship's engine, wiping sweat from his brow. "I've fixed worse," he replied, but even as he said it, he wasn't so sure. This ship was old, and its damage was extensive. He had always prided himself on being able to repair almost anything, but there was something about this job that made him feel uneasy. Alara seemed to read his thoughts. "If you can't fix it, we don't have a chance," she said, her voice lower now, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "This fleet is all I have left. My family's legacy, everything." Jared didn't respond at first. He knew what she meant. Her family's fleet wasn't just a group of ships, it was everything she had been raised to lead. Without it, Alara's family would lose their power, their control, and possibly their safety. But why had she come to him? There were hundreds of more skilled mechanics in the galaxy. Why trust him? A mechanic from the edge of space who barely had enough money to keep his shop open. He looked back at the ship and took a deep breath. "All right," he said, determination settling in. "Let's get this over with." For the next few hours, Jared worked tirelessly, his hands moving with practiced precision. Alara stayed close, handing him tools and making sure he had everything he needed. They didn't speak much, but Jared could feel the connection between them growing. He had never been someone who worked closely with others, but having Alara around was different. She wasn't just a bossy heiress, she was learning from him, taking his advice seriously, and even helping with small tasks. She wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty, something Jared didn't expect from someone like her. As they worked, Jared began to notice something he hadn't seen before. Alara wasn't just a rich girl playing at being a leader. She was smart, quick to understand the technical side of things, and incredibly focused. It was clear that she had been raised to be in charge, but it wasn't just because of her family's name. She had a mind for the work, and more importantly, a strong desire to protect her people. After a while, Jared took a step back from the engine, wiping his hands on a rag. He was exhausted, but the ship was starting to come together. The engines hummed to life, the wiring systems were nearly all fixed, and the damage to the hull had been patched up. There was still more to do, but it was a good start. "Looking good," Jared said, trying to keep his tone light. Alara smiled, but there was still worry in her eyes. "How much longer?" she asked. Jared thought for a moment. "Maybe a day or two. I'll need to go over the systems again to make sure everything's working properly. But it's coming along." Alara nodded, though her expression didn't ease. "We don't have that long. The enemy is already moving in on us. If we don't leave soon, we'll be trapped here." Jared turned to her, his frustration bubbling up. I'm not a miracle worker, Alara. This isn't going to be fixed in a few hours. I need more time. I know, she said quietly. But I don't know how much time we have left. My family's enemies are ruthless. They won't stop until they get what they want. Jared paused, realizing how serious the situation really was. He had been so focused on the mechanics of the ship that he hadn't truly grasped what this all meant for Alara. She wasn't just asking him to fix the ship, she was asking him to help save her family, her home, and everything she had worked for. A wave of understanding hit him, and he looked at Alara with new eyes. She wasn't just some rich heiress who thought she could buy anything. She was a woman who had inherited the weight of an empire, one that was crumbling under the pressure of forces she couldn't control. And now, she was trusting him, Jared, the mechanic, to help her save it. I'll do my best, Jared said, the words coming more easily now. But we need to move fast. Alara gave him a small smile. Thank you. As they continued to work, the air between them shifted. Jared realized that this wasn't just a job anymore. This was his chance to be part of something bigger, to use his skills to make a real difference. He had always thought that his life as a mechanic was small, insignificant, but now he saw that he had the power to change things, to help someone who truly needed him. For the first time in a long while, Jared felt something other than exhaustion. He felt purpose. The hours passed, and Jared found himself working side by side with Alara more often. It was strange at first, having someone else in his space while he worked. He was used to being alone, just him and the machines. But with Alara there, it felt different. She didn't stand back and watch. She jumped in, asking questions, offering suggestions, and doing what she could to help. Jared had expected her to be like other wealthy people he had met, distant, uninterested in the hard work of others. But Alara was different. She didn't treat him like a tool to be used for her own benefit. She respected his skills, and more than that, she was genuinely interested in what he had to say. There were times when she would sit with him, watching, as he worked on the ship's engine, asking him about the mechanics and how things worked. She didn't just listen for the sake of listening. She absorbed everything he taught her. And Jared found himself explaining things in a way he never had before. The words came easily. And to his surprise, Alara seemed to understand most of it. It was clear that she was no stranger to hard work, even if her life had been wrapped in wealth and privilege. She didn't seem like the type of person who expected everything to be handed to her. I never thought I'd understand how a ship's engine works, Alara said one day as she handed Jared a tool. But you've made it easy to follow. You're a good teacher, Jared. Jared chuckled, taking the tool from her. I never thought I'd be a teacher, he said. I'm just a mechanic. Alara smiled back at him. But there was something more in her eyes, a look that Jared couldn't quite place. It wasn't just gratitude or admiration. It was something deeper, something that made his heart beat a little faster. He quickly looked away, focusing on the task at hand. As the days passed, Jared realized that he was growing used to her presence. There was a comfort in working together, in having someone who didn't just stand by but actually cared about the work. And though Jared tried not to admit it, he enjoyed the moments when they shared a laugh or exchanged a look of understanding. One evening, as they took a break from the repairs, Jared leaned against the side of the ship, wiping sweat from his brow. He had been working nonstop for hours, and he was starting to feel the weight of it. Alara sat down beside him, her face flushed from the heat but her expression calm. Jared, she said softly, breaking the silence, why did you agree to help me? You didn't have to. You could have walked away, stayed in your workshop, and kept living your life the way you always have. Jared stared out at the stars, his mind wandering. I guess I didn't think it through at first, he admitted. But when I saw how desperate you were, I realized I couldn't just leave. I've always fixed things, ships, engines, machinery, but I've never been in a situation like this. I guess, in a way, I wanted to do something that mattered. Alara looked at him, her eyes softening. I never thought I'd be in a position like this either. I've spent my life in the shadow of my family's legacy, but I never really understood what that meant until now. I've had everything handed to me, but I've never felt like I was truly needed. Not until I met you." Jared turned to her, surprised by her words. "Needed?" He repeated. "You've got everything. You don't need anyone." Alara shook her head. "Not in the way you think. I've always been told what to do, where to go, what to be. But when I needed help, I couldn't turn to anyone in my family. They're too focused on their power and wealth. You're the only person who's seen me for who I really am. Not just the heiress, not just the person who's supposed to save everything." Jared didn't know how to respond. He had never thought of Alara in that way. He had always seen her as the woman who needed his help, not someone who needed him in a different way. It was strange, realizing that the person who had asked for his help was now opening up to him in ways that no one had before. "I didn't ask for your help because I was desperate," Alara continued, her voice quiet. "I asked because I trusted you, and I don't know if I've ever truly trusted anyone before." Jared looked at her, feeling a sudden warmth in his chest. He had always been the quiet, isolated person, but now he felt something stirring inside him. Alara wasn't just someone who needed saving. She was someone who was just as lost as he had been, trying to find her place in a world that expected so much of her. "You can trust me," Jared said, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. "I'll help you, whatever it takes." Alara smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't the smile of someone in a position of power. It was a smile of someone who felt understood. She reached out and touched his arm, a simple gesture that sent a wave of warmth through Jared. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You don't know what that means to me." As they continued working, side by side, Jared realized that their bond was growing. What had started as a simple repair job had become something deeper. He wasn't just fixing a ship, he was helping Alara fix something inside herself. And maybe, just maybe, she was helping him do the same. Jared wiped his hands on his rag and stood back, admiring the work they had done. The ship was almost ready. The engines hummed smoothly, and the hull had been repaired, the damage hidden behind fresh metal. The work had taken longer than expected, but it was worth it. They had both put in hours of effort, working side by side, learning more about each other than Jared ever thought possible. But even as the final touches were being made, Jared couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was a heaviness in the air, something unspoken between him and Alara. She had seemed more serious the past few hours, her attention divided between him and the ship's repairs. But also on something else. Jared didn't ask. He knew that her family's situation was urgent, but he couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease in the pit of his stomach. They had fixed the ship, yes, but was that enough? What was really going on? "You've done good work," Alara said, breaking the silence, "but there's more we need to do." Jared looked at her, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Alara sighed and looked away for a moment, her eyes distant. "I don't know how to say this. There's more to this situation than just fixing the ships." She paused, looking back at him. "There's a reason our fleet has been falling apart, and it's not just because of the enemy outside." Jared felt his heart race. "What are you saying?" "I found something," Alara said, walking over to a table and pulling out a small device from her bag. It looked like a data recorder. She placed it on the table and turned it on, revealing a series of encrypted files. "These files, they came from someone inside my family's circle. Someone who was trying to cover up the truth." Jared leaned in, his interest growing. "What truth?" "Someone in my family has been sabotaging the fleet," Alara said, her voice low and heavy with emotion. "They've been working with the rival faction, helping them break down our defenses from the inside. They wanted the fleet to fail. They wanted the power for themselves." Jared's mind spun. He had suspected something wasn't right, but he had never imagined that the betrayal went this deep. "Who would do something like that?" he asked, shaking his head. "Your own family?" Alara nodded, her expression pained. "I don't know who it is yet, but this isn't just an attack from the outside. It's a war from within, and we can't fight it without knowing who is behind it." Jared stood in silence, absorbing her words. It was hard to imagine someone close to Alara being involved in something so treacherous. Her family had power, influence, and wealth. Who would be foolish enough to risk everything for personal gain? Do you have any idea who it might be? Jared asked after a long pause. Alara looked away, her face clouded with worry. I don't know. The files don't tell me who it is. Just that someone in the inner circle has been betraying us. But I'm certain that if we don't figure this out soon, we'll lose everything. The enemy will have the upper hand. Jared felt a chill run through him. He had come here to fix ships, to do what he was good at. But now, it felt like he was caught up in something far bigger than he could have imagined. Alara wasn't just asking for help to fix the fleet. She was asking him to help uncover a conspiracy that could tear her family apart. We need to find out who did this, Jared said, his voice steady. If we can stop the betrayal, we might have a chance to fight back. Alara nodded, her eyes filled with determination. That's exactly what I was thinking. But we have to be careful. Whoever is behind this is dangerous. They've been working in the shadows for a long time. And if they find out we know, they'll do whatever it takes to stop us. Jared took a deep breath, trying to process everything. He had thought his role was simple: fix the ship, help Alara escape, and move on with his life. But now, it was clear that he was part of something much bigger. This wasn't just about repairing engines or fixing broken parts. It was about saving a legacy, a family, and maybe even the future of an entire empire. What do we do now? Jared asked, his voice quiet but firm. We gather information, Alara replied, her mind already racing with ideas. We'll start by going through the files and see if we can find any clues about who is involved. But we'll need to be careful. We can't trust anyone right now. Jared nodded. He understood the gravity of the situation. They couldn't just trust the people around them. They couldn't even trust Alara's family members. The sabotage was so deep that anyone could be involved, and the people they trusted the most might be the ones betraying them. As they sat down to review the files, Jared felt the weight of what they were about to do. This wasn't just about saving a fleet anymore. This was about uncovering a conspiracy that could change the course of everything. The fight had just gotten personal. Are you sure about this? Jared asked, looking at Alara. This could get us into serious trouble. I don't have a choice, she said, her voice resolute. This is bigger than me, bigger than my family. We have to stop them, Jared. We can't let them destroy everything we've worked for. Jared met her gaze, and for the first time since he had agreed to help her, he felt a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about ships, it was about justice. And he wasn't going to back down now. The next few days were a blur of activity, with Alara and Jared working tirelessly. The files they had uncovered pointed to a few key suspects, but none of them had the solid proof they needed. They had to be careful. Jared knew better than anyone that even the slightest mistake could lead to disaster. The stakes had become higher than he could have ever imagined. The repairs to the fleet were nearly done, but they both knew that time was running out. The enemy's fleet was closing in, and there was no way to predict when they would strike. Alara's family had been preparing for war, but there was still a dangerous uncertainty hanging in the air. Jared and Alara spent every spare moment they could going through the files, looking for clues and talking to the few people they could trust. Every lead felt like it might be the one that would reveal the traitor in their midst, but it was as if the conspiracy was built so carefully that every step they took seemed to lead to another dead end. One evening, as they sat in the quiet control room of one of the repaired ships, Alara broke the silence. I can't do this alone, Jared, she said, her voice shaky. I've never felt this helpless before. Jared glanced up from the datapad he had been studying. He could see the strain in her face, the exhaustion that had settled in over the past few days. You're not alone, he said, his voice steady. We're in this together. Alara looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief and vulnerability. Thank you, she whispered. I know you didn't sign up for this. I didn't expect any of this to happen. But you've been here, helping me. When I needed someone the most. Jared nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. The situation was growing more dangerous by the minute. They couldn't waste any more time. We've got to act fast, he said. If we don't stop the traitor soon, we won't be able to fight back when the enemy strikes. Alara stood, her posture tense but determined. I know. And I can't keep hiding behind my family's name. I need to take control. We both do. Jared watched as she made her decision. It wasn't the decision of an heiress who expected to be handed everything. It was the decision of someone who had fought for every inch of what she had and was willing to keep fighting, no matter the cost. All right, what's the plan? Jared asked, standing up as well. We expose the traitor, Alara said, her voice firm. We find the leak, and we deal with it before it's too late. Jared nodded, though he knew it wasn't going to be as simple as it sounded. There was a traitor in the family's ranks, and finding them was like searching for a needle in a haystack. But they couldn't wait any longer. The enemy would be here soon, and they needed every advantage they could get. The next day, Jared and Alara began gathering the few people they trusted. They met in a small, secure room. Away from prying eyes, Alara explained the situation to them, outlining the plan they had come up with. It was risky, and there was a chance it might not work, but it was the only option they had. Jared could see that some of the people in the room were nervous. The traitor cowl. DB anyone someone they worked with every day, someone who smiled at them in the halls. But they all agreed that something had to be done. The enemy was closing in, and they couldn't afford to let the traitor get away. As they made their preparations, Jared and Alara couldn't help but notice how close they had become. The trust they shared had grown stronger with every passing day. Every challenge they faced together, they were more than just allies now. They were a team. And Jared knew that whatever happened, he wasn't going to let Alara face this alone. Late that night, as they went over the final details of the plan, they received the news they had been dreading. The enemy fleet had arrived. It wasn't a surprise. Jared had known it was coming, but hearing it made everything feel more real. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a test. The fight for their survival had begun. We need to move out, Alara said, her voice steady but urgent. Get everyone ready. We launch tomorrow. Jared nodded. He felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. The repairs were done. The plan was in place. Now all they had to do was hold their ground and make sure that no enemy, no traitor could tear apart everything they had worked for. As the team began to prepare, Jared stayed by Alara's side, watching as she took charge. She was a natural leader, and even though she had always been in the shadows of her family's empire, he could see now that she was ready to step into the light when the time came. Jared boarded one of the ships, feeling the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. He was no soldier, but in that moment, he felt like one. They were fighting for something bigger than themselves. They were fighting for survival, for honor, for a future. The engines roared to life, and Jared's heart pounded in his chest. As the ship lifted off the ground, he looked over at Alara, who stood beside him, her eyes focused and determined. This was it. There was no turning back now. The battle had begun. Jared stood in the cockpit of the ship, his hands gripping the controls. The fleet was ready, and Alara was by his side, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. They had spent days preparing, but now it was time to put everything they had learned to the test. Jared's mind raced as the ship moved into position with the rest of the fleet. He wasn't a soldier. He was a mechanic, someone who fixed broken parts and repaired machines. But today, he had a new role. He was fighting for survival. We've got this, Alara said, her voice calm but filled with determination. We've come this far, Jared. We won't let anyone tear it all down now. Jared glanced at her. He had seen a side of her that few people ever got to see. She wasn't just an heiress. She was a leader, strong and unshaken in the face of everything that had happened. And as they prepared to face the enemy, Jared realized that he wasn't just helping her fix ships. He was helping her build a future. The enemy fleet loomed ahead, large and menacing. Jared could feel the tension in the air, and his heart raced in his chest. The repairs to the ships had gone well. But this was different. This was a fight for everything they had worked for, and they couldn't afford to lose. Prepare for battle, Alara ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. The crew scrambled to their stations, and Jared did the same, focusing on his task. He had helped fix the ships, but now he needed to make sure everything stayed in working order during the fight. One wrong move could change everything. As the ships began to fire, Jared's hands moved with practiced precision. He adjusted the ship's systems, making sure they were functioning perfectly. The roar of weapons outside could be heard even through the thick walls of the ship, but Jared didn't let it distract him. He had a job to do, and he was determined to do it right. Alara moved beside him, her eyes fixed on the battle unfolding before them. She wasn't just watching the fight, she was taking control, directing her fleet with the confidence of someone who had always been meant for this role. Jared had seen her as an heir to a family's power, but now he saw her as a true leader. "We need to outmaneuver them," Alara said, her voice filled with urgency. "If we keep them at a distance, we can pick them off one by one. Don't let them close." Jared nodded, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. "Got it. We're ready." The ships move as one, coordinated and precise, with Jared at the helm. He didn't know if they could win, but he knew they had to try. Alara had put everything on the line for this, and he wasn't going to let her down. The battle raged on, and Jared's heart pounded as the ships exchanged fire. The enemy was strong, their ships advanced and powerful, but Jared knew the weakness of the machines. He understood their systems, and he used that knowledge to their advantage. One by one, the enemy ships began to fall, their systems short-circuited, their weapons disabled. As the last enemy ship was taken out, a cheer went up from the crew. Jared exhaled, his tension lifting. But even as he allowed himself a moment of relief, he knew that the fight wasn't over. The damage to the fleet had been extensive, and there was still the matter of the traitor in their midst. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Alara stood up, her face filled with determination. "We've won the battle, but the real fight is just beginning. We can't let our guard down now. There's still more to do." Jared looked at her, his heart swelling with respect. She wasn't just a woman who had asked for his help. She was a leader, someone who had fought alongside him and earned his trust. They were in this together, and they would face whatever came next. "Where do we go from here?" Jared asked, his voice steady. Alara's gaze softened, and she gave him a small smile. "We rebuild. We fix what's broken and make sure that no one ever underestimates us again." As the fleet moved back to base, Jared couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had done it. Against all odds, they had fought back and won. But there was still much to be done. They had repaired the ships, but now they had to rebuild the trust that had been broken, uncover the traitor in their midst, and make sure that they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Jared had never been a part of something so big, but now he knew that he was part of something that mattered. He had helped fix the machines, but more importantly, he had helped fix the future. As the fleet landed back at the base, Jared turned to Alara, who was already making plans for the next steps. He could see the weight of responsibility in her eyes, but there was also hope. They had come a long way together, and the journey wasn't over yet. "You did it," Jared said, his voice filled with admiration. "You're going to lead your family, Alara. You're not just a princess, you're a queen." Alara smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude. "And I couldn't have done it without you, Jared. You've made all the difference." Together, they stood side by side, ready to face the future, whatever it may bring. The fight for survival had been hard, but now they had a chance to rebuild, to make things right. And as long as they were together, there was nothing they couldn't face.